Hey Facebook, it's it's Wednesday and this is Sergeant Dorsey Speaks live at 5. So I'm gonna have to start off with a bit of a disclaimer, if you will, in that I had oral surgery today, and my mouth is still numb and I'm having a hard time speaking. So if I sound a little funny, and if you notice that this side of my mouth is not moving as I speak, is because I can't feel it. And so I need you to bear with me. But because I'm a trooper, and because the show must go on, if you will, I'm here. I didn't want to miss getting together with you because there are some things that I needed to share with you and update. And so again, as you come on, welcome on your timeline, and make sure that others have an opportunity to see what it is we're talking about today. I'm going to do the same. I'm multitasking and trying to get this on my other. I don't see a lot. So, one of the things that I want to start off talking about today is something that I had shared with everyone last week. I did like a call to action, if you will. Hey, Dale. I did a call to action, and I was asking people to reach out with regards to Betty Shelby and her being allowed to teach a class called How to Survive a Critical Incident. When actually I call it How to Get Away with Murder. And so this class was supposed to happen on yesterday, and it didn't. It was supposed to happen on Monday, I'm sorry, and it didn't. And part of the reason, a big part of the reason is you guys, because a lot of you, at the behest of the Terrence Crutcher family, reached out and made your voices be heard with regards to opposition to Betty Shelby benefiting financially in the death of Terrence Crutcher. And so at the 11th hour on Sunday evening, word went out that Betty Shelby was invited to teach a class to the Southeastern Homicide Investigators Association, and that was to be held in Baton Rouge. So I want to thank everyone who played a part in that, in getting the word out, in expressing your opposition. I believe that it matters when we get active, when we get engaged, when we get involved, and I think we should continue to do that. And now, while Betty Shelby was not allowed to speak on Monday, my concern is that there will still be other opportunities where she may be invited to speak. And so I think it's important that we reach out to the Council on Law Enforcement, Education, and Training, which is the governmental facility, or the governmental agency, if you will, in Oklahoma, that allows her to teach this foolishness on a national level. And so, just like we did for this class that was to be held on Monday, I'm asking that you guys continue, and I'm going to put up a link, and it will take you to the Council on Law Enforcement, Education, and Training. And from there, you can email or just contact their social social media, because everybody has a social media presence, and you can contact them with regard to Shelby, former Oklahoma police officer, Rogers County Deputy Sheriff, who is accredited and certified through CLEAT, Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training, to teach this nonsense, not only in the state of Oklahoma, but on a national level, wherever police officers convene. And so if you have an opportunity, please do take the time to listen to my podcast that went out yesterday, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. You can find it on my Sergeant Dorsey Speaks Facebook page as well. For my YouTube family, on the podcast platform of your choosing, listen to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. It dropped on yesterday, where I talk in a little more detail about this Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training and what I think needs to happen going forward. I think there needs to be a total and complete kibosh on Betty Shelby teaching this class. And so thank you to everyone who got involved in that call to action. I just wanted to let you know that I believe our efforts were not in vain. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about is what's going on right now in Dallas. You know, a couple of weeks ago I was saying it was really quiet with regards to the whole Jean case, what was going on. And I just listen to my gut, and I still believe what I feel in my gut with regards to the outgoing district attorney, Faith Johnson. I think she was kind of dragging her feet and stalling with that whole investigation, because I think she suspected if she should lose her seat as the district attorney, then what would be the point in her really doing anything, right? And so sure enough, Faith Johnson, a black woman who happens to be a Republican, was voted out in Dallas during the midterm election, and they have a new district attorney. And this new district attorney seems to be completely and diametrically opposed to Faith Johnson's position. This new district attorney, John Crusoe, I think is how you pronounce his last name, states that just based on the limited information he's seen, he believes that there's sufficient evidence for Amber Guyger to be charged with murder rather than manslaughter, which is the thing that Faith Johnson was pushing, and she was pushing it mightily. And there's something else that's really odd about that situation, because there was also an article, and I'll share this with you. I'll put this on the timeline as well. There was an article written, and I've never heard of this in the history of ever either, where Faith Johnson has been voted out, and she's asking, you can read the article, she's asking to remain on the case, and she wants to take the Amber Guyger case to the grand jury. And I've never heard of anything like that. It's reported to be bizarre, if you will, that she's been shown the door, yet she wants to stick around and take this thing to the district attorney. Take this thing to the grand jury. And listen, the both Jean family is only going to get one bite at the grand jury apple, and so we don't want, I would imagine, that there's no appetite for Faith Johnson to take a manslaughter case, present a manslaughter case to the grand jury, because you're not going to be able to unring that bell. And the fact that she would even entertain that is just kind of nonsensical to me. So I don't know. I've never heard of that, and I'm hoping that the people there in Dallas will protest mightily to make sure that Faith Johnson does that thing that everybody seemed to want her to do, which was just go away. And so, again, this new DA, and I don't know when he takes over officially, but the new DA believes, based on the limited information that he's seen, there's sufficient evidence, and there's a precedent to take this Botham Jean murder case, if you will, to the grand jury. There's also been some reports with regards to the Faith, with regards to Amber Guyger and a possible defense that the police union, if you will, the Dallas Police Officers Association, is mounting on her behalf. The president over there, Mike, has been making some presentations about officers being overworked, and specifically Amber Guyger being overworked, and perhaps that had a role to play in her going to the wrong apartment and opening the door, but the key, I think, was a master key that she used based on the strength that I believe she was hired to be security there, on-site security, and so she was tired, and that's a possible defense that they may mount in this case, and so get ready for that. I mean, of course, that's not nonsensical in my mind, and if officers working extended hours and long periods of time is really an issue for the Dallas Police Department, then perhaps Police Chief Renee Hall might want to set up a cot room over there for her officers. So if you get off work and you're too tired to drive home, maybe it might not be a bad idea for you to go lay down so that you don't go into your neighbor's home and kill them. It's nonsensical that would even be a defense, but they've put forth a couple of different things with regard to how Amber Guyger wound up in Botham Jean's house to begin with, and none of it seems to be sticking, none of it seems to be resonating, and so now there is the belief that tired, overworked, and many of you may have seen, like I have, there was a whole scenario explained and played out about how Amber Guyger got off work. She went to right locker room. She did all the things she was supposed to do. She was able to find her car. Everything. Fatigue didn't play a part in any of the things she did up until the point when she got to Botham Jean's apartment. Then all of a sudden, she's really tired. And remember, there's a video out there that speaks to what in my mind is probably more likely the truth in terms of what happened. There's a video of Police Chief Renee Hall saying that the circumstances surrounding, hey John, welcome, the circumstances surrounding the whole shooting was very unique. She said the circumstances were very unique. She didn't expound on that, and so, you know, my question would be, what do you mean by unique? What makes it unique in the mind of Chief Renee Hall? Is that code talk? Is that double speak? Because she knows things, obviously, that she's not sharing with us, that the public doesn't know. What is it that made that situation unique? Was it unique that Amber Guyger was working security for the complex? Was it unique that Amber Guyger possibly had a master key that allowed her entry into Botham Jean's apartment? I don't know. She didn't say. She just said that there were unique circumstances, and I agree that there were unique circumstances, but I'd like to know what it is that she means by that. So, also, in the news, a lot has been said over the last couple of days, and I really wanted to, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to come on with you guys and talk to you. Share this again on your timeline as you come into the room. I wanted to talk about that young man, Jamel Roberson, 26-year-old Jamel Roberson in Chicago, who was shot and killed a few days ago. Now, the story is that Jamel Roberson was working as a security guard at a club, and there was a fight, and there were shots fired, and ultimately the police were called. This is in Chicago, and this is a suburb in Chicago called Midlothian. Oof. I know I'm murdering that name, but anyway, y'all know where it is in Chicago. And the police chief there, Mr. Delaney, Chief Dan Delaney, described this as, he said he was very saddened by this tragic accident. And so here we go again. You know, every time the police do something that they shouldn't do, when there's a shooting that should not happen, they describe it as tragic. And it really wasn't a tragic accident, because the officers that showed up, and there were several on scene, but only one of them decided to act hurriedly, if you will, and fired shots because he saw a man, a black man, with a gun. And you know, we always hear the NRA talk about that these shooting incidents would lessen if there was a good guy in the room with a gun. I guess that only applies if the good guy is a white guy. Right? If the good guy with the gun is a black guy, then he gets killed, which is what happened with 26-year-old Jamel. It was reported that Jamel was wearing probably attire that would signify him as security. It was reported that he had a hat on that said security, and dark clothing, probably the uniform that they wore there, black shirt, black pants, and a baseball cap of some sort that said security. And so my question, the thing that's troublesome for me with regards to this whole shooting is, again, what was the urgency? What was the exigent circumstance that caused this officer, upon arriving on scene, to immediately fire without taking a moment to assess the situation and try to determine what was going on? I know certainly, and we haven't heard the 911 call, but I'm certain that the information that was being given by the folks who were calling 911 with regards to the shooting in progress at this club identified the suspects, the shooters, the bad guys, because dispatchers are taught to ask those kinds of questions. What's the suspect wearing? Describe him to me. Is he male? Is he female? Is it a female? What is their ethnicity? So there's all kinds of questions that dispatch typically will ask. Hey John, I see your response. Yeah, and the patrons were shouting, "He's security." I saw that in a press conference with Jamel's brother. He said that everybody was yelling, "He's security, he's security." And so why this officer would fire on this black man doing his job is very problematic. And with all of the things that go on there in Chicago, with everything that you hear coming out of Chicago with regards to questionable circumstances surrounding police shootings, with, you know, young children who are allegedly committing suicide, and no one is really buying that story. And I don't know the young man's name, but I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about. I think he was about 15 or so, and it was alleged that he shot himself in the back of the head, and I don't know how you quite do that. But listen, Chicago has a history of foolishness, a history of corruption, a history of police officers using deadly force, falsifying police reports, putting people in the system unjustly, and administrators and politicians and the like look the other way. It's not a stretch to think that the officer who used deadly force in the case of Jamel Roberson may not have used that deadly force tragically and sadly, but on purpose. I read an article about an FBI report in 2012 to show that this is not anecdotal with regards to what goes on in Chicago. And the report said that as of 2012 anyway, black people being 31% of the people that were killed by police in Chicago, while blacks only make up 13% of the population. And so how is it that so many black people are being killed when there's such a disproportionately small number in society? How is it that in Chicago there is a detective right now by the name of Reynaldo Guevara who's under some scrutiny and being looked at with regards to framing 51 people for murder, according to an article in BuzzFeed News, and I'll share this article with you as well. This has been going on for a while, so I mean, Chicago didn't just get stupid. I mean, they've been treating black folks wrong for a long time, and they've been allowed to do it. According to this article, Chicago Police Detective Reynaldo Guevara, between 1980 through the early 2000s, is accused of framing at least 51 people for murder. And this has been going on, and they have been people who have been protesting, who've been bringing it to the attention of officials there in Chicago to no avail. Of these 51 people that have been falsely framed for murder, it's reported that 48 of them are men. There was one woman, and the criminal sentences totaled for these 51 people approximately 2,300 years in prison. Now, of these 51 people that have been accused of murder, it's reported that 3 were acquitted, 5 received a life sentence, 3 were sentenced to death but spared in 2003 by the then Governor George Ryan, and 2 men actually died while in jail. So there's a group of women who have been making a lot of noise and who have been trying to get those who are in a position of power to look at these people that have been arrested by this one detective, Guevara. And I guess now they finally got him, either they're deposing him or he's facing some kind of litigation. And in this process, according to the report that's written that I shared on the timeline with you, when they asked Mr. Guevara, who's now retired, about these various people, and they're just rattling off names of folks who have been imprisoned by him for crimes that is alleged to have, he's alleged to have known to not be true. His response has been, on the advice of my attorney, I assert my Fifth Amendment rights. And so that's been the response that he's been given, that he has been giving with regards to these ladies, these mothers and sisters and aunts of folks who have been wrongly sent to prison. Don't know when this thing is going to end, don't know if it's going to end. There's a civil rights firm by the name of Lovey and Lovey, looks like, who's representing dozens of people who've been accused, who have accused this detective of beating them into confessions and manipulating witnesses in the furtherance of putting folks in jail. Now, Guevara is retired. He retired in 2005. He's 73 years old, and he retired on a service pension. It says he gets about $75,000 a year, which is not a bad pension to get. And he continues to enjoy that pension as they try to get folks out of jail, as they try to unring that bell that has caused so many people great harm. People who are still serving sentences behind his misdeeds, and why government officials were ignoring this. The Chicago state attorney, it says, was ousted back in March. Kim Foxx was the state attorney general in Chicago, and she was ousted in March because of her inaction in this case. And DOJ, the U.S. Department of Justice, did a report, and they said that the police department was broadly ineffective and routinely ignored complaints. When folks called in to make complaints about misconduct. And I talk about the importance of complaining all the time, because it's in instances like this when, even though those complaints went ignored, now finally, albeit years later, someone is looking at this detective's activity, and now they're able to compile dozens and dozens of complaints that seemingly were legitimate but went ignored. And so imagine the numbers of people who didn't complain, who didn't file a complaint because they may have known someone or heard of someone who did and didn't get the kind of result or attention that they thought it deserved. But this is a really good example as to why it's important to file a complaint and create that record nonetheless. It may not benefit you, but somewhere down the road, the hope is that someone's attention will be garnered, and there will be an investigation. And now, for those who are still alive and those who are still imprisoned, there's an opportunity for this system to be righted. It's interesting in regards to this Detective Guevara, because there's a gentleman by the name of Anthony Wojcik, W-O-J-C-I-K. He's a lieutenant on the Chicago Police Department. And this lieutenant is the same officer, he's the same lieutenant who had signed off on the false reports regarding Laquan McDonald. And we know what happened in that case. We know that there were several officers who lied. And so detectives, lieutenants, police chiefs, district attorneys, commanders. I mean, there's all sorts of folks who are looking the other way in Chicago. And so I'm just wondering if they're going to look the other way with regards to Jamel Roberson, and whether or not they're going to be able to come up with an appropriate adjudication that deadly use of force in the case of Jamel Roberson. And so it's a lot going on in Chicago, and looks like, you know, this stuff has been going on for a long time. And I always say that, you know, the institutionalized racism that I know exists on police departments, top down. Top meaning police chief, commissioner, sheriff. Here's another example of exactly that kind of top-down racism that has been allowed to fester. It's the culture. It's the way that department works. And I don't know how many police chiefs or commissioners have been in place during these many years while this stuff is going on. And I don't know how the community, the citizens in Chicago, allow this. Voting has consequences, and not voting also has consequences. And so every police chief serves at the pleasure of the mayor. So there was also a report recently, and I saw this because there's an organization in Dallas called the Next Generation Action Network. And I saw something from one of the founders, the leader, Dominique Alexander, with regards to wanting an independent civilian review board there in Dallas. And they were touting this independent civilian review board that they have in Detroit. Now, I'm all for independent civilian review boards. You know, they don't have any teeth, but, you know, it's good to have them. The problem that I see with independent civilian review boards, much like inspector generals, is that they can only make recommendations when they find inappropriate behavior. And I know this to be true for a couple of reasons, because in Los Angeles, we have an independent civilian review board. It's called a police commission. And there have been times, well, at least one that I know of, where our independent review board, the police commission, did not agree with then Police Chief Charlie Beck with regards to deadly force that was used on Ezell Ford. And when our police commission made it known to Police Chief Charlie Beck that they didn't agree and they found fault with the shooting of Ezell Ford, a mentally ill young man who was shot by LAPD gang officers, Chief Charlie Beck said, okay, thank you. And he went on to exonerate the officers. They're still on the department. They've not suffered any, as far as I know, they haven't suffered any administrative penalties with regards to the deadly force. And so if you're going to have an independent civilian review board, Dallas, as you're setting it up, make sure that you put some teeth behind their recommendations, because if all they can do is just report facts, give an opinion, and the police chief, Renee Hall or whomever, gets to dismiss it, minimize, or mitigate it, then what's the point? So while they have an independent civilian review board in Detroit that they're all excited about, what I'm reading from articles is that even though they claim to have this robust civilian oversight since 1974, again, their board of police commissioners, they don't impose discipline, and they don't have any real teeth behind what ultimately happens if there's some kind of a policy violation. They have the authority to oversee police policy and hiring, and I don't know what that means. They have the authority to oversee it. So they oversee it, and then what? Do they encourage, do they demand that that police department hire more minorities, more people of color, if you will, on that department? Because I don't know that LAPD's police commission has any oversight with regards to hiring, because LAPD is predominantly Hispanic. Now, there are very few blacks on the Los Angeles Police Department. And if you understand that there are no police officers, then you understand that the feeder pool for lieutenants and captains and the such, you know, the like higher-ups becomes very limited. So you have an independent civilian review board. All they can do is make a recommendation, and they don't really get actively involved in recruiting. They don't make sure that they're recruiting people who look like the community. And more importantly, part of this hiring process, I think, should come with some kind of psychological evaluation that happens more than just once, right? because I think a lot of what goes on could maybe be averted if there was a psychological evaluation and an officer was found to be unfit and then helped off that department because they don't have the right temperament or they're ill-suited to do that job, because understand that everybody who wants to be the police should not necessarily be the police. And so if you're going to have an independent civilian review board, it needs to have some teeth. So I'm not going to be long today because I had oral surgery today, for those of you that are just joining me. And it's kind of difficult for me to talk because half of my face is numb. But I really wanted to just give you my thoughts on that Jamel Roberson shooting and how I, of course, am in opposition to anything that sounds like the officers acted appropriately. Mr. Roberson should absolutely still be alive. He was doing his job. He was dressed in a way that should have alerted the officers responding. It's reported that people were telling the officers as they respond who's who in the melee. I'm sure dispatch received information with regards to what Mr. Roberson may look like and how you can identify him from the bad guys, and yet this officer took his life. And so I'll continue to monitor this as I do the other things, and I'll continue to come back and bring you updates with regards to what's going on. Very interested to see what's going to happen in Dallas with this new district attorney and the Botham Jean case. I hope and pray he can wrangle this thing out of the hands of Faith Johnson, and she is not allowed to stick around and gum this thing up, because the family's only going to have one opportunity. So thank you guys so much for stopping and listening. As always, be sure to check out my podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, because I will say things there that I do not necessarily say here. I don't repeat the same things, and vice versa. If you catch me on Facebook, I'm going to say something here very different than what I say on Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Visit my website, sergeantcheryldorsey.com. You can find information there about where I may be speaking coming forward. You can find links to my book, The Creation of a Social Advocate. And you can also follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. So, until next time, what are you saying to me, John? You really appreciate me being a trooper. Oh. Well, you know what? I didn't want to miss, because I missed you guys once before. I was gone for a week because, you know, I was trying to get cute, right? And so there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and I didn't, you'd be surprised within a week. So much happens that I really have to condense what it is that I want to say. So I didn't want to do that again today, even though I'm not 100%. But I appreciate you guys being troopers too and hanging in there with me. And I'll see you next week. So until then, be good and be safe.